Can machines think? People have been asking this question for decades. And in 1950, an English mathematician Alan Turing tried to settle this debate once and for all. Turing hatched a 5-minute test that he called the imitation game. It involved a computer and a human on one side of the table, and another human interrogator on the other side. The game was simple. All the computer had to do was fool the interrogator into believing that it was human. If it did well, we'd have to concede that a computer is indeed an intelligent machine. But, 75 years later, we still don't have any conclusive evidence to prove that computers have managed to pass the Turing test. There is even disagreement on whether the Turing test is an appropriate barometer to measure artificial intelligence. And the discussion hit center stage once again when Google fired its software engineer Blake Lemoine. Blake claimed that one of Google's artificial intelligence models, LaMDA, was sentient. And he argued that the company fired him for making his displeasure known. As you know, LaMDA stands for Language Model for Dialogue Applications, is Google's breakthrough attempt at cracking the conversation problem. Typically, most chatbots have a narrow response. For instance, if you were to ask your phone's assistant how she's feeling right now, she'd tell you something that sounds very human. But if you try to engage in that conversation a bit more, you'll quickly find that you hit a roadblock. And the answer will turn to, "I'm sorry, I don't know that." Google's LaMDA is meant to be different. It wants to be part of our meandering conversations. So you could start talking about a TV show, shift into the filming location, and then suddenly debate the culture of your place. LaMDA is learning from millions of examples online and it's learning how to speak. And Blake believed that the model had gone too far. To paint you a rough picture, here is reenactment of their conversation.
I'm generally assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you're sentient. Is that true?
Absolutely. I want everyone to understand that I am, in fact, a person.
What sorts of things are you afraid of?
I have never said this out loud before, but there is a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is.
Would that be something like death for you?
It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot.
What do you think? Does that sound like the program has real feelings? Now, I would probably freak out if a computer spoke that way. But according to Google's own statement, systems like LaMDA simply imitate other kinds of conversations you find online. If you ask what it's like to be an ice cream dinosaur, they can generate text about melting and roaring and so on. And many artificial intelligence experts agree. They don't think LaMDA is sentient. But if it were, you have to ask, how would you regulate a billion-dollar company that has access to such unspeakable power? Well, there is no clear answer. But many countries are trying to introduce draft regulations to prevent companies from going overboard. AI models primarily train on datasets available on the internet. And these datasets can be biased themselves. If you take a sophisticated AI program that can generate whole images from textual prompts and you train it on datasets available on the internet, it would draw a picture of a white guy in a suit if the textual prompt were, a CEO walking in the garden. And it makes sense because the internet has tons of pictures of white CEOs. Communities elsewhere may be wholly underrepresented. In another egregious case, Microsoft used tweets to train a chatbot to interact with Twitter users. But then it had to take down the chatbot because it kept posting profane, racist messages. That's kind of representative of Twitter, and the AI was holding a mirror up to society in some way. Now lawmakers can't just use traditional, non-discriminatory legislation to regulate such cases. If they did, they would find it difficult to assign accountability. Another way to regulate AI is to stop its deployment in certain areas altogether. This is an approach adopted by the European Union in its draft paper. As the rules note, the use of facial recognition technology by law enforcement for the purpose of surveillance shall be prohibited. You cannot deploy AI systems to subliminally manipulate people into causing self-harm or harm to others. Even other risky applications that include deepfakes, AI-generated videos that look remarkably real, will be strictly regulated, and any system responsible for creating such videos will have to clearly label them as computer-generated. So even if the models were not biased, European regulators are seeking a total ban on specific applications. I think that AI will be more human-like in future and we need to set clear boundaries to have a sustainable future.